And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show, broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios, which today is in the suburbs of Fort Worth, Texas. And it has me hungry to get back to California so I can go to Morongo, maybe to the steakhouse, have a nice steak, maybe finish it off with some butter cake. Mr. Randy Wangs at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, there was a debate with our California Senate candidates, excluding the one that already got appointed to the job, and Katie Porter was asked if she supports a policy that would mean members of Congress don't get paid when the government shuts down. And here's what she had to say.
We have a Congress made up of rich people, of privileged people, and that's why they're so quick to ask for their paycheck to be withheld. I'm like each of you. I buy groceries on that paycheck.
Well, you can't accuse her of being inconsistent.
No!
That's on the board now.
800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the president and CEO of the Union Rescue Mission. You can get him online at urm.org and follow him on Twitter at @Bales, the Reverend Andy Bales. Welcome.
Thank you so much, John.
All right, Reverend. So you know, as I do, that sometimes politicians will say one thing in public and a different thing in private. It's part of the game. It's part of the business. I guess to a certain degree, all of them have to. However, you shouldn't believe your own BS when your own BS is going to end up causing you more problems in the future. And I say that because so many of our electeds are of the belief that the homeless crisis in California is strictly a high cost of living issue. If we were to lower the cost of living in California, the homeless problem would be fixed and everyone would be living in a home and there would be nothing to worry about. They will not acknowledge that the fundamental cause of our homeless crisis in California is drug and alcohol addiction and mental illness that we are not treating properly. And they're on the streets not because they're priced out of the market, but because they have other issues that are not being dealt with. And because they seem to really internalize their argument that it's a cost of living issue, they're doing things that don't seem very bright to me, including LA Metro is now considering adding homeless navigation hubs right next to Union Station. And the California Teachers Union, or one of the top members of the California Teachers Union, wants homeless people to be able to sleep in public school parking lots after school and I guess before school starts. Both of those things seem like a complete disaster to me, but they're moving forward with it. Your thoughts?
Yes, we do have a problem, acknowledging that we have a fundamental breakdown in families that's leading to mental health issues, leading to addiction issues, leading us to homelessness, and not just leading us to, but causing us to have skyrocketing homeless rates. And until we wrap our heads around bringing the kind of supportive services along with whether it's transitional housing or housing, we will not begin to address homelessness, and homelessness will continue to skyrocket. And just enabling homelessness will not get us out of this either. I'm going to speak next Saturday at graduation at Hope Gardens, where moms who came in who'd lost their kids to situations in life, whether it was meth or domestic abuse, have gained their kids back, are graduating. One of the moms came up to me the other day and said, "You saved my life. I called you. I was homeless and alone. You sent an Uber, picked me up, brought me here. Today I got all 5 of my kids back. You saved my life." That's the kind of care that people devastated by homelessness need. long-term transitional housing, very supportive housing with wraparound services in a sober, safe environment. And our state's going to continue to fail as long as they don't acknowledge that is the true need.
How difficult is it for you to get our electeds to pay attention to you when you are someone who has devoted your entire adult life to trying to fix the homeless problem here in the state of California? You have an education, you have expertise, you have years of experience. Yet on the other side, what they have is they have developers who have the ability to write huge campaign contributions and say, look, it's a win-win situation if you side with me. Not only do you get the campaign contributions, but, you can turn your district and say, look, I'm building things. There's progress going on, and it looks good when you're fundamentally ignoring the problem.
Yes, it's very difficult because it's not only the developers paying the development fees and giving the campaign kickbacks, but it's activists who somehow truly believe that housing is the way out of this. And although I think the politicians listen, some really listen, they're sometimes frozen because of the backlash they get from the activists and the developers.
In California, there was legislation that was written that passed the state legislature that was vetoed ultimately by Governor Newsom. And this one kind of surprised me, that would have legalized psychedelics in the state of California. So you could legally purchase them, you could legally consume them. I assume you could do them in public or wherever it is that you want to do. I'm thinking to myself as I was reading the article about it, how can you open up your front door? How can you look around you? How can you see what we're dealing with right now? We can't handle the drug addiction that we're dealing with on a daily basis as it is. Why would you say, you know what the state needs? The state needs more drugs. Let's legalize more drugs and have more drugs available to the population that's already addicted to whatever it is that we have now.
Yeah, I'm hoping a group that I've been affiliated with, North America Recovers, had something to do with Governor Newsom changing his mind. We've made great progress showing the damage that drugs have done, and Mayor London Breed has paid attention to that and taken action in San Francisco. And Governor Newsom, vetoed putting safe injection sites in cities, but cities, of course, are ignoring him, and some are moving ahead, including L.A. But I'm proud of Governor Newsom for vetoing, turning down this psychedelic drugs. We don't need more drugs. We have too many drugs now. We have too many overdose deaths. We have a real crisis on our hands with overdose deaths.
When you go in to meet with these legislators, or you go in to meet with these executives, council members, county supervisors, appointed officials, whatever the case may be, how often do you think they're really sitting there and listening to you and hearing you make your argument and giving you a fair shake? And how often do you think that they already have their mind made up and you're just wasting your time and theirs?
Well, I'm probably optimistic enough to believe that a right word can always make a difference, and believing there's always hope. And some of the progress that's been made this year, including the turning down of the mushrooms and the psychedelic drugs, shows some of the progress in San Francisco that my friends have made at bringing in the feds and highway patrol, and some of that has made a difference. So I guess you're always in the fight as long as you're in the fight.
What's the saying? You are either at the table or on the menu?
Yeah, you'd better be at the table.
So last week, there was a statistic that we became aware of that was just unbelievably shocking to me, and I think for a lot of people out there when we heard this. In the last 18 months, there has been exactly one criminal conviction for dealing fentanyl in the city and county of San Francisco. Either they decided not to charge the accused drug dealer with a crime, or they take it to trial and the alleged drug dealer makes the claim that they were human trafficked and they were selling drugs against their own free will. They had no choice other than to sell the fentanyl, so don't blame me. I'm the true victim here. And the jury seemed to be buying that argument, and they are acquitting these people when the district attorney's office brings them up on charges, to the degree that only one person in 18 months has been convicted. When I look at those numbers, you can't help but to think to yourself, we're still beating our heads up against the wall here. One conviction in 18 months with the drug problems that city has, you're not going to make a dent in getting those dealers off the streets unless you start to put the ones who are doing it in prison.
Yeah, that's truly shocking. And I have loved ones who did time for dealing, and it actually helped them shape up and change their lives. And so I'm an advocate for whatever it takes to transform someone, including jail, if that's what's needed. And so they're doing a disservice by allowing the drug trade to continue unabated.
How is it that we got to the point where putting someone who's dealing drugs in prison is cruel, but letting people die on the streets is humane?
I do not know. It's very hard to wrap your head around the fact that we're losing 6 people per day, mostly from overdose deaths in Los Angeles, and we just don't take the steps that would cause the number to lower. As long as those numbers keep rising, we know we are experiencing collective failure in our ability to address addiction and homelessness in LA.
Last question before you go. With the individuals that you work with at the Union Rescue Mission, I would imagine that, like in San Francisco and other parts of the country, you're dealing with people who are addicted to fentanyl too. One of the things that we see with fentanyl is that people don't necessarily start out going to dealers saying, I want fentanyl. They start out buying illegal drugs where fentanyl is laced with that drug, and they start taking fentanyl that they don't even know that they're taking, and then you develop an addiction to it. How often do they start their addiction to fentanyl by taking something that they had no clue had any association with that hard and deadly drug at all?
Hard to judge, but I do know people who've died of fentanyl when they thought they were buying something else. And, that's the worst. We've lost beloved friends who went out on the streets to try something but died of fentanyl. So there's no way to trust the supply that's on the streets. There's no such thing as a safe supply. There's no such thing as a safe supply of fentanyl, because fentanyl is deadly. Even a little bit of fentanyl is deadly, and it is highly addictive, and we can thank the cartels for that. The cartels, hired a brain to develop fentanyl, and in order to make meth more addictive, in order to make everything more addictive. And as if it wasn't making enough money, they needed to make more money. So all of our policies that are light on drugs really are only supporting cartels, and that's what everybody should remember. Our policies, as in their current state, are supporting cartels and killing our people on the street.
Reverend Andy Bales, President and CEO of the Union Rescue Mission. You can get him online at urm.org and follow him on Twitter at @abales. Reverend Bales, thanks so much for stopping by this Monday.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, as always. You know, Randy, if they actually follow through with this and they allow the homeless to move into the parking lots of public schools, why do they assume that they're going to leave when school starts?
They're not.
No. Once they move the RVs in, once they move the encampments in, it's not like a pup tent where you put it up and you take it down and you leave and you're on your way. They're going to bring all of the things that they have on the streets and in the encampments with them, including the drugs, including the stolen goods, everything you don't want children being exposed to. That's going to be right there on the school property next to where they're playing on the playground.
It's really bizarre. Over the last couple of years, we went from trying to ban homeless encampments near schools to bringing them right there into the parking lot.
Now, I wonder what the reaction would be among the parents. If you are a parent and your local neighborhood school that your kid attends sends you a note and says, hey, great news, we're turning the parking lot where you drop your kid off into a homeless encampment only after hours. Isn't this wonderful? I would imagine that those school board meetings are going to be absolutely bonkers.
You're going to have a whole lot of parents starting to sound like Cecily Meyer Cruz.
And I want you to be all the way pissed off.
Well, imagine this for a second, because we know what they find in the homeless encampments. They find needles, they find drugs, they find stolen goods, they find human waste, and more disgusting things. If all of a sudden that's what your kid has to deal with on a daily basis, your head will explode. This is one that I think is even a bridge too far for California. Someone somewhere is going to block this. I know they're crazy, and maybe they want to legalize mushrooms because that's what they were taking when they came up with this idea. But I can't imagine. Can you imagine Karen Bass signing on to this?
Oh, the recall process would start on day one.
How about Newsom? He wants to be president.
I have a feeling Newsom's idea about this is this.
That is something we are mindful of.
You know, in the old days, it used to be that parents would tell their kids that they used to walk to school in blizzards, uphill, both ways, 5 miles each way. Spring, fall, winter, you name it. What's the next generation going to say? Well, you know, my mom dropped me off at the front of the school, and I had to walk through needles. I had to walk through feces. I had to walk through drugs. I had to walk past people who were engaged in sexual behavior. Naked people screaming at lampposts. Boy, after hearing that, I'll tell you, I think I'd rather go to school in Pittsburgh. I'll take the snow and the uphill walk both ways. I don't want any part of the needles. Well, maybe they can just incorporate that into science class. All right, children, we're learning the periodic tables today. How many of these chemicals did you see in the parking lot while walking in? Extra credit if you can tell me what are the components of meth.
The first thing that's going to be stolen on every single one of these schools is all the chemistry equipment.
Oh, we're not going to be able to keep it stocked. How about all the plastic straws from the cafeteria?
Those are gone.
Not a good idea. Not a good idea. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to listen to us, the show's halfway over. let's say at 3:01 p.m. today, that just got a whole lot easier.
That's right. Just go to KABC.com, click on podcast, or go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. But wait, I got something even easier for you. Just download the KABC app, search KABC AM in the Apple App Store or the Android App Store, and you have the easiest way ever to listen live when you're not near an AM radio. So from noon to 3, listen live to this show, and then at 3:01, click on the podcast button. It's got all the podcasts. I try to upload them as soon as the hour ends, and you can listen to it with CarPlay. In fact, if it's 3 o'clock on the dot and you listen live to 3 hours of the John Phillips Show from noon to 3, and then from 3:01 until 6:01, you listen to 3 more hours of the podcasts, it would be like this.
I receive things on both ends.
I guess, in a way, that's true.
We often lead from the front, but it is time for us to lead from the back.
We've been on the receiving end.
Got any more?
To understand that push-pull.
How about an aperitif?
That moves the needle on the inside.
All right. Right now, we're going through the sound of the sit-down that L.A. Mayor Karen Bass did with ABC 7's Mark Brown.
Let's hear what the mayor had to say about her signature program, Inside Safe.
We've got our first viewer question. It's from Jamie from Mid-City. Wants to know, can you release data on Inside Safe? How many people are off the street and for how long? I still see a lot of homeless and RVs. Who is getting these giant contracts? First of all, how many folks are off the street on Inside Safe? And let's address the rest of the question.
First of all, we have a comprehensive plan around homelessness, and Inside Safe is just one plan. We have about 1,700 people that we've gotten out of tents.
That's it?
Inside Safe started out looking like she was putting a dent in it because they were taking some homeless people off the streets and putting them in motels. However, Chapter 2, they light the motels on fire, they create disturbances at the motel, they get kicked out of the motel, and then they're back on the streets, and you, the taxpayer, has to pay to fix the motel.
Oh, you're so optimistic.
And into motels. 84% of those individuals have stayed in the motels. Now, a number...
So 16%. So let's say 1,700. Let's just round, say 15% of that. So 300 of the 1,700 said bye-bye and went somewhere else.
Well, yes. However, just because they continue to keep the motel room in their name doesn't necessarily mean that's where they're spending their time. They can still be hanging out with all their friends in the encampment, participating in the drug trade.
Well, you remember when the former sheriff Villanueva did the census of all the people on the Venice Boardwalk, several of the people that had a tent on the boardwalk also had a shelter bed. So it was like their beachfront vacation home.
That's right. Some people like to have a place Monday through Friday and then let their hair down on the weekend where they can let them be them.
Now, a number of them we've moved from motels into permanent housing, but that's probably one of my greatest disappointments is that we haven't been able to move more, and that's because a lot of people were already in interim housing waiting to be moved in, and so our folks in motels are further down the line. In terms of people that we've gotten off the street, period, with more than Inside Safe, it's been about 17,000 because
Okay, if that's true, that would be a huge dent. That would mean that the number next year would be 30,000 instead of 47,000. But I have a feeling the number is not going to be 30,000 next year.
No, the number is going to be higher than whatever it was last year.
In terms of people that we've gotten off the street, period, with more than Inside Safe, it's been about 17,000 because one of the pieces of my plan is to expedite the building and also for those projects that were already in the queue to fast forward them. So we had a number.
Yes, we fast forwarded them so much the neighborhoods didn't even know that a single family home in Sherman Oaks and Westchester is being turned into a 7-story building.
How is this supposed to help the homeless problem?
To fast forward them. So we had a number of projects that shouldn't have come online, meaning buildings that shouldn't be open until next year. But through some of the initiatives that we've had to break through the bureaucracy, those buildings have been opened faster and we've been able to get people housed.
All right. Are there still beds available for people right now, or are these motels and hotels, for example, filling up?
Well, yes, they are filling up for sure. But every time we go to an encampment, we make plans with the motel ahead of time. So we've been...
Hey, we're about to turn your place into a slum.
You got that to look forward to, Tom Bodette.
So we've been doing 1 to 2 encampments a week, and I would agree with the caller. There's 46,000 people unhoused, so we have a long way to go. But I'm going to tell you something, Mark, that I'm worried, and that's the number of evictions people are facing now. I'm worried that the count could possibly go up because of the end of COVID relief.
No. You do not get to blame this on evictions. Anyone who has ever tried to evict someone knows how long it takes to actually kick somebody out, even if they've been waiting and waiting and waiting. You can't say anyone has actually been kicked out of their place yet.
She wants to make the argument with a straight face that the eviction laws are too landlord-friendly.
In this state? Did she see the story we did last week about the Airbnb person in Brentwood?
Guess she was watching sports that day.
And that's the number of evictions people are facing now. I'm worried that the count could possibly go up because of the end of COVID relief.
Now, here's my other question. If you're saying the reason the number is going up is because of evictions, then how come the number went up in 2020, 2021, and 2022 when no evictions were allowed to happen?
That's one she doesn't have an answer for.
And also the end to the eviction moratorium. So we have a plan to address preventing people from falling into homelessness as well.
I love that phrase. People just fall into homelessness.
No, they don't fall into homelessness.
I slipped and fell, and the needle went right into my arm.
Well, if you slip and you fall, the needle's not going to go into your arm. But this is the mentality. It is virtually impossible to build anything in the city of Los Angeles without jumping through a gazillion hoops and paying people off. That's basically what's required, which is why whenever there's a project that they want to get done, they have to come up with special carve-outs. They have to fast-track it in some capacity or another. They're doing that right now for these buildings that they want built in residential areas, like what we talked about last week in Westchester. Way back when, they had to do it for Staples Center. And that leads to a couple of different questions. First and foremost, if it's such a nightmare, by their own admission, to build anything in L.A., how about changing those rules so that people can do it the right way without having to pay people off or do it in the dead of night? Can we start there? The second thing is, I don't think that she believes that we are overly regulated. I think she just understands that the regulations that she supports will be used against her and her own projects. So the only way to get the projects that she wants done through is to keep the onerous regulations on the books, but just do a carve out for the things that she specifically wants. That's what they're doing.
It's not a namsy-pamsy thing.
It's 1:45. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Jeff writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com about the homeless encampments. I wonder why there's never an environmental impact report on the homeless encampments or the lines and lines of parked RVs.
Oh, yes, because if they had an environmental impact report on the homeless encampments, they'd tell you to wear a hazmat suit. Right now, we're going through the sound of L.A. Mayor Karen Bass's sit-down with ABC 7's Mark Brown.
No!
By the way, right on top of each other is this Karen Bass saying no.
No!
Followed by this woman saying no.
No!
Who said it better?
Oh, Katie Porter.
No!
No.
Let's hear what Karen Bass has to say about eviction.
All right, and that is one of the viewer questions. This is from Ephraim from South Los Angeles, another viewer who had this to ask of you. What assistance is offered to the working, law-abiding citizen in Los Angeles? How are they going to be assisted so that in months they won't be a homeless family needing help?
If you're a law-abiding citizen and you're working, chances are you won't be homeless.
Exactly. But we all have to pretend like that's not the case.
You know what? This city has become unaffordable. Housing is too expensive. You know, the median cost to own a house now is close to $1 million in Los Angeles. So as far as I'm concerned, the only answer to that is to increase the supply. And that's why we have set things in place to cut through the red tape. Developers will tell you all the time that it's so hard to build in Los Angeles because when you have red tape and when you have delays, that increase the cost. But we also have to increase wages as well. And so I have an entire initiative around small businesses, since small business is the major employer in Los Angeles. So we have to make sure that our business community is thriving so that they can hire.
Oh, they're all getting smashed and grabbed, though.
They're shutting down right and left.
So that they can hire people and pay higher wages so people can afford to live in our city.
And, of course, the state of California just announcing that the minimum wage for fast food workers is going up.
Right.
So that should help, one hopes.
It does, but then we also have to be careful with the business owners as well to make sure that they can pay those higher wages. That's why we need to do everything we can to make sure they are successful.
And the thing that we're doing is allowing developers to turn a single-family house into a 7-story shelter.
You know, of all of the options, of all of the tools that she has at her disposal, that's the one they picked? Let's take a single-family residential neighborhood, and let's just start putting skyscrapers up and putting the homeless in there.
She may have not actually intended that when she put forth the emergency order to accelerate housing, but believe you me, if anyone's going to find a loophole, it's the developers. And guess what? Once a project gets approved, it gets approved.
There's a reason that we have zoning. Have you ever been to a place that doesn't have zoning?
Houston.
Houston has absolutely zero zoning. You will be in an area that has these huge mansions, huge, beautiful mansions, and then, boom, there's an apartment building right next door, and boom, there's a high-rise right next to that, and then there's a shack on the opposite side, and then you've got a 7-Eleven, and then you've got this, and then you've got that. It makes no sense.
It's a rich tapestry.
Chicago is kind of like that in certain parts of town. If you ever go to a Cubs game at Wrigley Field, there's no parking there because Wrigley Field is right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Imagine putting Dodger Stadium in West Hollywood. That's Wrigley Field. And apparently we're going to be more like Houston and more like that neighborhood in Chicago without the charm.
Landowners, just take one, just take two, and we'll work with you.
All right, we've got one more hour coming up on the John Phillips Show. Eddie Scarry joins us next. Don't you go anywhere. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.
No! 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 No!